So we're getting to the issue of Social Security solvent, and helping us answer that question, our panel right now includes Eric Brucker, professor of economics at Widener University's School of Business Administration. He is the co-author of the Widener Elder Pennsylvanian Survey, Baby Boomers to Centenarians. Also on our panel is Joanne Butler, Senior Economic Fellow at the Caesar Rodney Institute. Prior to joining the Caesar Rodney Institute, Joanne Butler was a liaison for the Social Security Administration. Among her other credentials, she was an economist with the Ways and Means Committee of the U.S. House of Representatives, where she worked on Social Security reform and disability issues. And also on our panel is Lawrence Seidman. He is a Chaplain Tyler Professor of Economics at the University of Delaware, specializing in macroeconomics and public finance. He is also the author of Funding Social Security, a Strategic Alternative. An excellent panel and audience. Remember, you can ask your questions if you're here in the room, write them down. We'll collect them if you're joining us on our webcast. You can email your questions to us. We'll begin with the sky is falling question. With the topic, I think it's an obvious. Is Social Security facing an imminent crisis? Will the checks stop? And let's start with Eric Brucker, and we'll work our way through the panel.
No, I don't think that the sky is falling in any way. Is that there may need to be some minor changes to Social Security, but I don't see that it's anywhere near the dilemma that some people would place it. I was interested in the last panel, though, that Alice hit the nerve of senior living, and that's Medicare. This is a panel on Social Security. We could have a long talk about Medicare. In our surveys of Pennsylvanians, the one thing that they are the most frightened by is spending all their money on health care. In the future, the retirees are concerned. Interestingly enough, the non-retirees are even more concerned about the health care question.
Well, let me go to Joanne Butler, because it's blame it on the baby boomers, right? Isn't that part of the reason we think the sky is falling? There's just too many people in one demographic.
Well, back in 1983, the Congress and President Reagan, they recognized that the baby boomers were going to present a problem, and they raised taxes. They increased the retirement age, which is what we're going through right now, to create a surplus for the trust fund. And that surplus is there. It's, trillions of dollars, and it's earning interest. In fact, the interest today that the surplus has generated is helping to pay for benefits today. And it's considered to be solvent really till about 2035 or 2036, when the last of what I call these surplus bonds, because that's what happens. The taxes are the taxes go into the Social Security trust fund, so to speak, but by law they have to be converted into special bonds. So instead of borrowing the money, say, from China, what we're doing is we're borrowing the money from Social Security, and that money is being spent on current expenses. Well, the bonds have to be paid back. So one of the things that's going to be happening as the baby boomers retire, and again, this was planned back in 1983, as the baby boomers retire, the bonds will be redeemed. So first, we're paying benefits through the interest income, and then we're redeeming the bonds. Now, what happens by about 2035, 2036? Well, at that point, the idea is that these surplus bonds are kaput. They're finished. The last of them have been redeemed, and the system then becomes really, truly what we would call pay-as-you-go system, where the taxes that come in today go out tomorrow as benefits. So, in and out. And at that point, it's reckoned that the Social Security would pay about 75% of benefits.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. So, so in terms of the sky is falling, it's not, it's not as if the checks won't even go out in 2037, shall we say.
Well, let's go to Lawrence Seidman, who looks toward 2040, and you say we don't have a crisis, but it is a problem. Explain that.
Yeah, and I agree everything that my two colleagues have said here. Social Security has a problem. It will not collapse, and the reason it will never collapse is because the main source of funding the benefit checks are compulsory payroll taxes. The trust fund buildup of U.S. Treasury bonds is a supplement. It began very wisely, as Joanne said, in the 1980s. It will build up for the next couple of years. It will then be drawn down. Then we'll be back to our basic source that it's always been, the payroll tax. Now let me ask you this. Do any of you think in 2035, 2040 that Congress or the President will vote to cut, much less abolish, the payroll tax? If the answer is no, then there is no possibility of Social Security collapsing. Social Security does need to make some changes. As Joanne said, when the supplementary trust fund bonds are drawn down, and we have to rely once again completely on the payroll tax, under the current rates, under the scheduled benefits, about 3/4 of the benefits can be paid. The worst that could happen is 3/4 of the scheduled benefits, which, by the way, will be a level of benefits adjusted for inflation comparable to what people are getting today. That's the worst that can happen, because there will be wage growth, so even 3/4 of the benefits will be roughly the purchasing power of today. That's the worst that can happen. Now, we shouldn't let it go to that point and suddenly have that cut. What it takes is a compromise, a gradual slowing of the growth rate of benefits, a gradual increase of the revenues coming in. Excellent report by the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office in July of 2010. There have been dozens of reports like this over the last decade of, on the tax side, on the benefit side, how you can gradually close that gap to avoid any abrupt disruption come 2035 or 2040. What does a terrible disservice is many young adults, the polls show, think that they will get little or no benefit from Social Security. They think it will go bankrupt or collapse. There are some people who have misled them intentionally. There are others who maybe misunderstand. That's got to stop if we're to have an intelligent debate.
Well, let's take a look at some of the recent poll information on public opinion. From a Wall Street Journal NBC News poll back in March, more than 3 in 4 Americans reject the idea of cutting Social Security benefits. According to a New York Times CBS poll in January of this year, nearly 2/3 of Americans choose higher payroll taxes for Medicare and Social Security over reduced benefits for either program. And if asked to choose among cuts to Medicare, Social Security, or the nation's third largest spending program, the military, a majority, and this is by a large margin, say cut the Pentagon. Eric Brucker, you conducted the Widener University's Elder Pennsylvanian survey. What did you find? Are these echoed here in our local region as well? How concerned are people about Social Security, and do they have an accurate idea of what is being laid out for them in the future?
Yes and no. It depends which people you talk to. I think that there is, as Larry has suggested, quite a bit of non-understanding about Social Security in many dimensions, for starters. Let's turn to the area that I think is most important, that's Medicare, and the health problem. Most people are aware that's a major challenge. In Pennsylvania, 80% of the people that we surveyed over age 46 had one chronic disease. 90% of the people that were retired had one or more. 50% of them had 3 or more. Yet these are the same people that don't have long-term health insurance, and they're asked why, and they say, well, it's too expensive. Or the answer I really love is, I won't need it. How they know that, I do not know. But they're convinced that they don't. So I guess my response is, they're very, very worried about health care. They don't know what to do about it. And remember that health care and Social Security are connected. Part B of Medicare, which almost everyone takes, is subtracted from your Social Security benefit every month. We've been fortunate this year that Social Security benefits are going up about 3.5%, and actually the Part B contribution has gone down. So that's a good thing, but don't count on it lasting. So I think the answer is that you have to be concerned about the whole picture. People on Social Security are not doing spectacularly well. We separated people out as to what was the major source of your retirement income? Social Security, employer pension, 401k, or private saving. About 45% said Social Security. They're not doing as well in terms of ability to pay, et cetera, but they're not doing really horribly either. My concern isn't about Social Security, it's about the other three sources of retirement income. It won't increase the Social Security bill, but it's going to increase retirees' dependence upon it if, in fact, 401ks are not the winner that people thought they were. They've lost income in the stock market, their homes' values have gone down, not so good. And what's worse, the sleeping giant is the phasing out of corporate pensions. That used to be a major source of supplement to Social Security. It's getting less so. The only place where pensions do well, or pensioners do well, is in the public sector. They're doing just fine, thank you. Their pensions are quite high.
Let me direct something back to Joanne, though, because I want to get on the issue of the financing procedures, which you touched on in your first comment. But they've been in place, as you said, in the 30s. Why do you think there's so much debate over the financing procedures before we start ducking from the sky is falling on your response there on pensions? But let's stick to that and get a clarification there.
All right, do you want to say that again?
Why do you think there is so much debate over the financing procedures if they've been in place, we know what they are, and there is a fail-safe there to make sure that the program remains solvent?
Well, you know, when you're talking about what, you know, maybe if you can remember your sociology class, when talking about Maslow's hierarchy, right? Yep. You know, we're talking about something that's, you know, very fundamental in terms of people's confidence in the future. And, you know, frankly, it is a complicated system. You know, we've got trust funds and, you know, money comes in and money goes out, and we have surpluses and we have taxes and this and that. And so I think part of it is driven by, you know, the complexity of the system, but it's a big system. One of the things I learned when I worked for the Social Security Administration was it's huge. It's huge. It is complicated. We're a big country. We're a big, diverse country, and it's a big, big program.
Well, let's get to some questions and answers at this point. And I want to remind you, if you have one, please write it down. Email for those of you that are joining us electronically for today's panel discussion. We're now talking about Social Security solvency. And joining us for this is Lawrence Seidman, Chaplain Tyler Professor of Economics at the University of Delaware, Eric Brucker, a Professor of Economics at Widener, and Joanne Butler, Senior Economic Fellow at the Caesar Rodney Institute. As we get into these questions, the first thing that I would like to ask, and I'm going to start with Lawrence Seidman, and that is, we have policymakers coming up on our next panel. What do you want to hear from them? What do you want to hear from those that are in the decision-making position?
I would like them to make at least 2 points. One is, we've got a problem, but it's very fixable, and the way to fix it is going to involve bipartisan compromise. Some slowing of benefit growth, some raising of taxes. Now, once again, if there's no compromise, the program does not collapse, okay? Right. If the Republicans troll Congress and the White House in 2035, 2040, all right, then the payroll tax will stay as it is and won't be raised at all, and there'll be no additional revenue. That means the benefit level will come down from 100 to 75. That 75 at that point will be higher in real purchasing power than what beneficiaries are getting today. That's the worst that can happen from the beneficiary side. If the other side, if the Democrats control Congress and the White House, then the taxes, probably mainly on upper income, will be raised as a supplement to payroll, and the benefits will stay closer to that 100 rather than being brought down to 75. Let's have both sides come in, have some give, but if either are extreme, that's the worst that can happen. I'd like to see the political leaders explain that, number one. But number two, I would like them to get rid of the nonsense that the system is going to collapse, that it's going to go bankrupt, that the trust fund, the treasury bonds in it are phony pieces of paper that mean nothing, that Congress has raided the Social Security Trust Fund and there's nothing in it. Anytime somebody borrows Anytime, rather, somebody lends, which is what Social Security is doing to the U.S. Treasury, the borrower, the U.S. Treasury, takes the money and spends it. When you buy stocks or bonds, whoever's issued those, they take the money and spend it. Your money is never there. When you put it in the bank lends it out. Your money is not there. That's always the way it is. All right? That's right. That's always the way it is. Congress has not rated.
Okay.
So when politicians try to frighten people with these charges, I'd like to see other statesmen step up and say that's false.
All right, we will get to that, and I saw nodding from the other two panelists during your response, so we'll go right to one of our audience questions, and that is, when we hear about the number of eligible recipients, does that include factors such as those who will die before collecting their benefits, the number of spouses who might or might not collect? Are these figures considered onto how much our contributions earned as a percentage of recipients?
Yes, the actuaries, I used to call them the green eye shade guys because, you know, they live with these numbers. They crunch all those numbers and they do it very, very well. But a couple of things on the solvency and in terms of trends that I think, let's put it this way, I have had some discussions with the actuaries in the past, and I've wondered about these things, and I think it's worth bringing them up. You know, back in the 80s, and looking around this room, and I assume the folks who are watching this on the webcast and listening on the radio, you might remember back in the day when people would get lung cancer, all right? You know, we were smokers, smoking was common, there probably would have been a smoking room in this room. And, you know, that was the kind of thing that would, for better or worse, it would kill you off quickly, all right? You know, you cough, right? You cough, you go to the doctor, he says, put your affairs in order, and, you know, that was that. So those folks were not, you know, they might collect Social Security for a year or two, and that was it. So, you know, we've done away with the smoking, people are living longer, so they're collecting benefits. But on the other hand, and this is the point I had with the actuaries, is that, you know, now we hear a lot about obesity, and people are, you know, very overweight and you know, all these sorts of problems, and that causes all these chronic illnesses. Mm-hmm. So unlike smoking, where the doctor would just say, no, sorry, you know, you've got people who are going to be living a bit longer, but while they're alive, they're going to be ill. They're going to need dialysis. They're going to be needing treatment and things like that. And I think that's, and the thing with obesity is it doesn't appear on the death certificate, to bring it back to the actuaries, is, you know, diabetes will show up, but not obesity. So I think it's a little harder for the actuaries to take that into account. But I often wonder if what we're dealing with today is a situation where we've got people who are no longer smoking, but the full effects of obesity in America hasn't really kicked in completely yet, and we may see that in the years to come.
Let me put another factor out, and perhaps Eric Brucker or Lawrence Seidman are the right person to answer this. How do the increases in benefits for low earners, the issue of those that are not, you know, especially people who are right now facing a total change in their lifetime income because of our economic situation, how does that address the long-range solvency issue?
I think that one of the things that's interesting is that in the Great Recession, there's some evidence, first of all, that more people are looking for jobs, not finding them, and taking early Social Security retirement at 62. For the long run, that is not a good decision, but it may be a necessary decision. If you wait until your full age, 66, 67, you'll get 28% more per month. It doesn't impact Social Security that much, but it's interesting. Social Security, remember, was always intended to deal with necessities of retirement life. It was never intended to be a full retirement program. People at the low end that you're talking about will expect just from the Social Security to get about 50% of their working income in retirement. People who are at the high end, the cutoff end, the high salary people, they will probably get about 23%. And some of that more wealthy contributors is being channeled down into the lower income groups.
We're just about, I have about 10 seconds if you can
Well,
do it in that
just
short
quickly,
time.
yeah, there's one thing I like about Social Security is that Congress has a benefit formula for years that does partial redistributing from high-income workers to low-income workers. If low-income workers had to depend solely on individual accounts and saving, they would not do as well as they do under Social Security.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. We're going to look toward the future in just a moment, but meanwhile, I want to thank each of you for joining us, including Eric Brucker, Joanne Butler, and Lawrence Seidman. Thank you so much.